All right, we're gonna get rolling. It's 12 o'clock. So hello everybody. Hope you guys are having a good week so far. I'm excited to jump into today's topic. We're gonna talk about everything inflammation rise. We're gonna talk about how to reduce inflammation in the body, what inflammation is, let's understand all the components of it. And then I want to give you some actionable tips on ways that you can incorporate an anti-inflammatory or lifestyle into your day-to-day life. So we are gonna just kind of talk all the things, and I'm excited to get started. So like I said, today we're going to talk about what inflammation actually is. We're going to talk about the inflammatory response. We'll talk about different types. We'll talk about how inflammation actually is caused in the body and what's the link between inflammation and disease as well too. We'll talk about dietary strategies to reduce inflammation, lifestyle interventions, and then we'll talk about different supplements as well too. And then wrap it all up with a recap as well too. I feel like this is an important topic to address because I feel like a lot of people use the word inflammation in a very willy-nilly way, and inflammation is way more than just like, okay, you have inflammation. There's a root cause behind it, and inflammation isn't just a root cause. So that's why I want to take the time to really dissect everything a little bit more so that way everybody has the ability to feel empowered with the different knowledge here. So let's go ahead and hop into it. So essentially what inflammation is, I want you to kind of think about it as your body's natural response to different harmful stimuli. So these harmful stimuli could be different pathogens, maybe different cells are damaged, maybe there's irritants. It could be external irritants. Think about the type of season that we're in. We're starting to hit that springtime season where everything's blooming. A lot of times that's when allergies start to creep up for a lot of people. That can create an inflammatory response for people. Now, the thing I think that gets the most myth-led about inflammation is that people often, you know, denote it as a negative and bad, but inflammation as a whole and that process that our body creates in an automatic way is actually helping us to protect itself. Now, of course, like having too much inflammation is bad and you want to create that balance, but our body's actually doing it as a protective mechanism. And I think that's the one thing that gets overlooked most oftentimes is that we just associate with like inflammation is just bad as a whole. It's kind of the same thing like cortisol. A lot of people think like, okay, cortisol is bad, but we need cortisol in order to stimulate a lot of different things. So inflammation is great because it can tell us that something is wrong, and then we have the ability to sort of like figure out why that is. So, when we're looking at inflammation or inflammatory, conditions for many people, we're taking that and we're saying like, okay, the body is presenting itself with X, Y, and Z. Let's work to reduce that too. So that is the brief introduction on inflammation. I want to kind of go into how this response actually happens because I think this is where you may appreciate things a little bit more too. So essentially, the inflammatory response is a series of a lot of complex and biological processes, and it's aimed to remove a lot of things that cause injury. It helps to clear out damage and initiate tissue repair, which all sound really amazing, right? We want to make sure that our cells are functioning and they're optimal. They are not injured by any capacity. We want to reduce damage so that way it doesn't overflow our proverbial rain barrel. And we want our tissues to repair so that way we can be stronger, more resilient types of humans as well too. So that's the inflammatory response process. So the key players that actually play a role in this process are a few different things. So you may be familiar with white blood cells because a lot of you probably have gotten your white blood cell count tested through your blood work, and there are a collection of other specific white blood cells too that tell us different things in the body. So your white blood cells are essential components of your immune system, and they're involved in detecting and eliminating pathogens and also foreign substances. We want that, right? We don't want, bacteria overgrowth. We don't want mold. We don't want random things kind of popping in our body because then it creates stress and we don't want that. So when you are, looking at your blood work, it's important to understand whether or not your white blood cell count is actually within an optimal range. And if so, you're doing great. But if not, we want to consider ways to support that too. Another really big contributor to the inflammatory response are cytokines. So you may be familiar with this through the literature, or maybe you're not, and that's totally okay too. But essentially cytokines are signaling molecules that regulate the inflammation and immune response. So it basically tells us how much of it to kind of push out the body. You can kind of think of it like that. So we obviously want to have a process and a component of the inflammatory response that says like, okay, once the inflammation is gone, we want to bring ourselves back to a baseline there. And hopefully you can start to see how things are like working in a more balanced perspective. And it's not always that you are pushing things out and then coming back down. We need to make sure that our body is really having all the nutrients and the resources in order to, bring us into a balanced state. Some other really key players of an inflammatory response are prostaglandins, they're histamines as well too, and reoxidative oxygen species. And they play a key role in just regulating the inflammatory response as well too. So moving on, let's talk about types of inflammation. So you've got acute inflammation, you've got chronic inflammation. These are two like big broad umbrellas kind of live under inflammation. So you can think of acute inflammation as something that's more rapid in onset and has a pretty short duration. So potentially this could be triggered by like an injury or an infection or tissue damage. So, maybe you have a bacterial infection or a viral infection, or maybe you fall and you scrape your leg or you cut your, like anything like that. Those are all things that you can consider more acute base. Things turn to be more chronic when things are more long-term and persistent, and they last more than like a few weeks to, years potentially too. And oftentimes these types of chronic inflammation can be associated with more like autoimmune based conditions. So think about some of those conditions that maybe you could be working through, or maybe a friend or a family member. Chronic inflammation is also a piece of obesity as well too, because our body isn't meant to hold on to a lot of body fat and it doesn't like that, so it's constantly working and fighting itself too. And then chronic infections too, so potentially a bacterial infection or potentially a parasite infection, anything like that could be infections that fall under that chronic inflammation space. And I listed some other ones down here for you too: rheumatoid arthritis, irritable bowel disease, maybe if you've got Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, maybe if you have COPD or atherosclerosis. Those are all chronic inflammatory conditions, all of which that you want to work to modulate that inflammatory response, give your immune system some nourishment so that way you can ensure that things aren't going to kind of trickle off into other parts of the body. Because once there's inflammation in one part of the body, our body focuses on that one piece and it's not going to think like, okay, I want to make sure my thyroid is regulated, or I want to make sure I'm producing adequate amounts of my hormones too. So all of this kind of works hand in hand that way. So let's go through causes of inflammation. I was sort of teasing that out as we were kind of talking through things, but one of the biggest things that I see are external triggers. So these are namely pathogen based. They could be bacteria, they could be viruses, they could be different fungi, they could be mold as well too. I've been saying that a lot for many individuals too, and other organisms that can invade and trigger an immune based response and inflammation. So that's essentially what you want to sort of take away from this, is that we're not supposed to have bacteria, pathogens in our body, or fungi or mold. That's not supposed to live into our body. So our immune system says, hey, I don't like that, so I'm going to trigger this whole entire response, send the entire army over there to get rid and wipe out the response. Now, if you are somebody that has a lot of different other symptoms and things like that, maybe you're dealing with hormonal imbalances or other things, this response, it tends to, get slower and slower because you are depleting yourself of essential nutrients. So another external trigger is injuries and some toxins as well too. Think about things that are surrounding you in the environment, the water you drink, the air you breathe, the food that you eat as well too. Pollutants, chemicals, and allergens can all provoke inflammation. And this isn't to scare you or anything like that. It's to give you that knowledge and empower you too. And I totally understand that, you can't control the air that you breathe fully. And that's why you want to just make sure that you are doing the necessary things to keep your immune system as strong as possible. Some internal triggers now could be things like stress. And I know that's sort of a big, broad umbrella term, but think about like psychological stress. Maybe if you have some PTSD, or maybe if you're dealing with some anxiety, think emotional based stress as well too. all of those things can trigger and stimulate the release of a stress hormone called cortisol, like we talked a little bit about. And cortisol, when chronically elevated for a long period of time, let's say you're in like a chronic period of prolonged psychological or emotional based stress, that can lead to inflammation as well too in the body. And that's why it's important to have the strategies in place to ensure that you are able to kind of keep that inflammation pretty low and the cortisol levels low too. A poor diet can also be a huge trigger for many individuals too. A lot of our diet and the food that is just out there in the real world isn't, or just like in our world, not even the real world, just our world in general, isn't a diet that's rich in omega-3 fatty acids. And omega-3 fatty acids are really crucial when modulating for inflammation. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like too. And then, of course, autoimmune conditions. So any type of immune condition, of course, your immune system is chronically firing on all sorts there. So what you can kind of see and pick apart from here is that there's external things that happen, there's internal things that happen, and that's why it's important to look at things from a holistic perspective. How are you feeling mentally? What are you eating? What does your blood work say as well too? All of these things need to be taken into account when you're thinking about inflammation as a whole. That's why just like broad blanket statement, inflammation is your root cause, isn't really sufficient enough to actually get you to the answer that you want to be at too and optimize your body. So let's just quickly talk about the relationship and link between inflammation and disease. So it's important to address inflammation for overall health. Like I told you, you're probably alluding to it now. Chronic inflammation is a hallmark of different disease-based states and can be a significant contributor to their progression and severity. So, think about anything that maybe you're working through, or maybe some things that other people are working through. It's likely that a couple other individuals that are likely dealing with some other condition as well, that similar condition. So, let's use like PCOS, for example. There's a plethora of different individuals that are dealing with PCOS and have PCOS-based symptoms. Now, what I want you to sort of take away from that is that the progression of somebody's PCOS and severity of somebody's PCOS looks different from every single person. It's that individualized approach that you want to think about. And a lot of that is due to their inflammatory road. What does other markers look like? What is their immune system fighting? And this is why it's really important to think and look at blood work, for example, because it allows you to give a better insight on what other things could potentially be causing some excess inflammation for you, and potentially making your case of PCOS progress more quickly than maybe a friend or a family member. So addressing inflammation is crucial for preventing disease development, and it's helpful to allow you to be more in an optimal state. It slows the progression, and it also improves treatment outcomes. So this is where we're going to start to slowly get into different modifications that you can make through your diet, through your lifestyle, things like that too. By targeting lifestyle modifications and dietary interventions, and also appropriate therapies, like maybe some supplementation, or maybe it's also using external sources like a therapist or someone to talk to as well, to like balance and mitigate through stress. You can reduce a lot of the chronic disease and just enhance your overall well-being. So again, inflammation doesn't have to be your end all be all, but there are reasons behind it, and there's things that you can do to lower your inflammation. So let's walk through that right now. So let's talk about dietary. So I love talking about the nutrition aspect of things because I think it's really helpful, but I realize that sometimes it can be super overwhelming because there's so much food out there. There's so much like knowledge and things like that too. And I recognize that for the vast majority of people, sometimes just being told what to do and how to do it is just the simplest way possible. So I wanted to break this down into really like digestible pieces of information for you. So here are some of my favorite anti-inflammatory foods, but also nutrients as well too. So the first one, fatty fish. So think about your salmon here. These fatty fish are rich in omega-3 fatty acids, and when you're thinking about omega-3 fatty acids, their main purpose is to create an anti-inflammatory response and reduce inflammation. A lot of the more processed things that we have in our world are more higher in omega-6 fatty acids, and that breeds inflammation, that creates more stress in the body. And you can think about omega-3s from a cardiovascular perspective if you want to, but you can also just think about it from an inflammatory perspective as well too. So fatty fish is a really great source there that you can consider for more of that rich omega-3 anti-inflammatory based food. Something else that you can consider as well too are berries. So they're packed with antioxidants. They are rich in flavonoids and vitamin C as well too. And they do a really great job of combating inflammation and oxidative stress. I've also really loved utilizing that like deep, rich color of berries, like a cranberry, like that deep red, or blackberry, that deep, black, blue, kind of purple color, because they help to feed a really important good bacteria in our gut, and it helps to just make you more resilient to that as well too, and it like reduces that inflammation. So, berries, you can consider putting that on top or having it as a snack or something like that. And that goes for all berries, like blueberries and strawberries and cranberries and raspberries and blackberries. Like, have at it, because they're rich in that vitamin C and we're rich in antioxidants. Um, Next are leafy greens here. So leafy greens are exceptionally helpful because they're really rich in vitamins and minerals, but they also have a lot of phytonutrients as well too. And the really cool thing about leafy greens is they contain a lot of sodium and potassium and calcium and magnesium, all of which are needed to modulate a stress response as well too. So think about your spinaches here, your kale, and a lot of those darker leafy green colors, and nuts and seeds. So healthy fats are really important for reducing inflammation. Fiber, they also have fiber, and they also contain antioxidants. I want to hone in onto the fiber for a second, because fiber is also a really great thing to have, especially from an elimination perspective. So you want to make sure you are having enough fiber to make sure that you can eliminate some of the different toxins and things like that out of your body to reduce inflammation too. So it's not just about just eating it to get the nutrients, it's also helpful for the elimination aspect of things as well too. So a lot of these like harmful things stay out of your body and, get excreted elsewhere. Olive oil is really amazing because it contains oxalic acid and polyphenols as well too, which have been shown to reduce a lot of inflammation for people. So cooking with olive oil, using olive oil on a salad dressing is also incredibly amazing and nourishing for the body as well too. And potentially just, walking away from some of the seed oils like canola oil and things like that, because then it gives you the ability to at least get the best out of everything that you're using every single day, because that's the goal, right? You want to make sure that when you're eating, you are eating for taste, obviously, and there's the smell aspect and the enjoyment aspect of food, but the other component is also eating in a way that you can eat for a long period of time, that's going to provide you with the essential nutrients, so that way you can stay as nourished as possible. And turmeric and ginger are two really amazing, we'll call them spices, as they are really and have been shown to reduce a lot of inflammation for many individuals. So using turmeric with black pepper to really activate that curcumin response is really amazing to help reduce inflammation. And ginger is something that I like to have individuals use while they are drinking their dinner meal to help with digestion, but also there's the compound gingerol as well too, that is also really amazing for reducing inflammation, bloating, things like that too. So something that you can consider as you're eating more of your heavier, denser base meals, have some ginger tea there too. Also really great for when you're sick. Let's talk lifestyle interventions now. So we talked a lot about food in pretty great detail, but there's things that you can do on a day-to-day basis to also help with your stress your inflammation, really. One thing is stress management. I know this is sort of like easier said than done, but just as well as I do that chronic stress can trigger the release of pro-inflammatory cytokinase. And maybe you didn't know that exact thing, but it triggers cortisol. And when we have too much cortisol, we already talked about how that is like increasing our inflammatory response. So finding ways to manage your stress as best as you possibly can, taking time to yourself. This is why it's really encouraged for you to take a step away from stressful things and go for a walk really quickly to kind of clear your head. Exercise is another really great lifestyle intervention as well, because regular physical activity has shown to have anti-inflammatory effects. It improves your immune function, and it also can reduce inflammation markers in the body, particularly HCSRP, which you can get tested through your blood work as well too. So you can look at what your level actually is and see your inflammatory response. Now, we're going to come back to my like slight little caveat in just a second. So sedentary behavior and lack of exercise can contribute to a lot of chronic inflammation. Think like joint pain, things like that. Not really moving your body too much, you're going to have that inflammation built up there. But the other really amazing thing about exercise is that it encourages lymphatic drainage and movement. So I like to talk about the lymphatic system as your garbage disposal system. It basically takes all the toxins and it like helps your body to remove it. Now, your circulatory system, your heart, your blood, everything like that, it has your heart to kind of pump blood through to the rest of the body. There's not really a pump to pump any of the lymphatic fluid or waste products. So kind of just sort of sits there. So doing some sort of exercise and like moving your body, going for a walk, doing some strength training, even like, if you're able to jump up and down, that's types of things like that encourages greater lymphatic movement, so that way there's less inflammation in the lymph nodes as well too. Now, my caveat with exercise is obviously we want to be careful. If you've got hormonal imbalances or anything like that, or you've got really bad adrenal fatigue, you need to be intentional about your exercise as well too. And this is the aspect of exercise that I think we overlook, is that sometimes more is not always better. And if you are really inflamed and you are really fatigued and you are really, working through your healing journey, doing, 7 days a week of exercise is not going to be ideal for you. So even considering like a sauna can be really rejuvenating for people, or honestly, even going for a walk can be super beneficial for a lower impact. Stretching is another really great thing. So definitely don't overdo it on the exercise, and just be mindful on where you are at in your healing journey. And if you have questions, like, you can certainly reach out to us. We're happy to help there. Now, sleep is another lifestyle invention or intervention that we can kind of consider as well too. So inadequate sleep or poor sleep quality can disrupt your immune-based function, and it can also promote inflammation. So while you are getting in your deep sleep, it's very restorative. You're, kind of killing off the bad things, and your immune system is kind of working in that capacity. But if you are missing your deep sleep mark more times than not throughout the evenings, then you aren't going to be able to, get all of those benefits, and your body will start to accumulate more of that inflammation. Here are some supplements that you can consider for, support to help you through supporting inflammation. We talked about a lot about omega-3 fatty acids already, and I essentially told you that they have potent anti-inflammatory effects and they can reduce inflammatory markers in the body. Curcumin is the component that's derived from turmeric, and that compound is really helpful for building our antioxidant properties, so that way we can fight off any type of inflammation and increase our immune-based response. Ginger helps with anti-inflammatory, but it also helps with reducing inflammation, which is why I like to have people typically use it when they are having that dinner meal, so that it can help like reduce bloating and things like that. Quercetin is another really amazing supplement to modulate an immune-based response and also reduce inflammatory markers in the body. And vitamin D, another one that I feel like is often overlooked for its immune-based properties, but it helps to reduce inflammation and also improve immune function as well too. And just a note here, you can test for a lot of these variables, and especially testing for vitamin D is especially crucial because it will dictate the dosing that you want to incorporate, because that's the thing, you don't want to, not everybody needs to have the same dosing for every condition. That's where that bio-individual aspect comes in to play. So I would encourage you to get some blood work done, get some testing done, and then figure out the best dosing for you with a practitioner there. So let's go ahead and recap a little bit right now. So basically, we know that inflammation is out there. We know that we probably have different levels of inflammation, and everybody's dealing with different amounts of it. But it's important to understand the root cause of your inflammation, and lab testing can be really helpful with this, as well as just like acknowledging like how do you feel in the present moment. Inflammation can manifest itself into serious health concerns. That's why it's important to tackle it, but you need to understand the root cause as to why, so that way you can create a really proactive approach to reducing that inflammation too. And you can create a life to work to reduce inflammation through a lot of the dietary and the nutritional things that we talked about. And supplements can be really helpful with inflammation. Remember, supplements aren't meant to take forever. They're to help you for the time being, to help you nourish yourself, get your levels to an optimal level, and then work on maintenance. So ultimately, if you work to understand whatever your root cause is it autoimmune? Is it hormonal? Is it obesity? Is it any one of those things or more? Once you understand that root cause and you work to replace the deficiencies, inflammation can be reduced, and you don't have to feel like super puffy, fatigued, and all of the other symptoms that come with it, along the lines of it. And that's why we really were intentional about making April the month in which we created a new spring challenge for you all, where we are talking about how to replenish and renew, and replenish your deficiencies and bring your body into a state of newness, into a state of wholeness, where you're able to feel better and better and learn how to optimize your health in a better way. So if you haven't signed up for our challenge, this is definitely an invitation to do so. And we're very much looking forward to sharing all the things that we have there. But I hope this was super helpful. If you have any questions about inflammation or root cause behind inflammation, you can feel free to reach out through Practice Better if you're already a patient or a client with us. If not, you can also reach out to us on Instagram, send us a DM, or Facebook, send us a message, literally anywhere. We are pretty much on all platforms. So don't hesitate to reach out, and we will talk to you guys very, very soon. Thanks so much for joining.